The Mount Washington Auto Road welcomes you to the heart of the White Mountains and your adventure on the Northeast's highest peak. You are about to embark on a journey that will do more than just take you to the highest summit in the Northeast. You are going to the birthplace of legends, following up a path that leads through time and winds its way through woods, wind, and weather. At the state park on top, you'll see the home of the Mount Washington Observatory and the historic Summit Stage Office, which is where the world's highest winds were recorded in 1934. But more about that later. This audio tour will be your information and entertainment guide as you travel on the oldest man-made attraction in the United States. Your driving time to the top will be approximately 25 minutes, and this tour will help you understand a lot more about the remarkable views and amazing things that have happened here since the road opened to the public in 1861. Now, before we get into all the storytelling on how this remarkable road came to be and some of the funny things folks have done on it, we have some pretty important information to pass along. Among other wonders, you will be entering the Fragile Alpine Zone, home to many rare and unique forms of plants and flowers. There will be many opportunities to stop your car and walk around, so please take care to leave these special environments as you found them. It is only because others have been thoughtful in past generations that these small, endangered treasures are still here for us to enjoy. So if you watch your step, future generations might have the same opportunity. It is only through our continued stewardship that we can protect and preserve the resources that we all treasure. Now just imagine that this road opened to the public in 1861, and the scenes which are about to unfold before you have remained unchanged since then. Also unchanged is the need for safe driving. Now the road's remarkable safety record over the past century and a half is because drivers, whether in horse-drawn vehicles of the old days or the motor vehicles of this century, respect the basic rules of safety, which apply to the trip up and down Mount Washington. As you ascend the mountain and then descend after your visit to the summit, these driving tips will help maximize safety and minimize inconvenience. Please keep the following in mind as your journey continues. The auto road has two-way traffic coming and going at all times. Keep to your side of the road. Don't worry, it's wide enough for two cars to pass anywhere on the road. We urge you to drive up in low gear. This means less work for your engine and allows it to run cooler. You should stay in low gear for your entire trip up and down the road. If ever there was a road that was designed for low gear, this is it. Mark Twain once said, "If you don't like the weather in New England, just wait a minute." He must have been thinking of Mount Washington because things can change quickly and dramatically around here. Depending on conditions, you should maintain a speed of approximately 15 to 20 miles an hour. Now, your actual speed will depend on traffic and prevailing weather conditions. If it seems like you're holding up cars behind you, please be considerate of others and allow them to pass. Avoid using your air conditioner, as this may cause the engine to overwork. There will be plenty of cool air to refresh you as you continue to gain elevation. If the vehicle does begin to run hot, turn on the heater. It may sound strange, but it will actually help cool the engine. Should you find yourself driving in a fog at any time while on the mountain, turn on your headlights for the sake of all oncoming traffic. And please remember, it's a New Hampshire state law that all persons under 18 years of age must wear a seatbelt. If either on the way up or down, for any reason you need assistance, flag down one of the white and green vans or road crew pickup trucks. Our drivers will be happy to help you in any way. Also, remember that cars coming down should yield the right of way to cars going up. Now, let's get to the storytelling about the place you've come to. The creation of our road to the sky all began back in 1853 when the New Hampshire legislature granted a charter to General David Macomber to build the 8-mile road to the summit. It was a challenging task he set for himself, to say the least, but he had a vision. See, the White Mountains were beginning to gain a reputation as a destination resort, with grand hotels catering to wealthy travelers for the summer season. His path to the top of New England would surely be the high point of any visit to the North Country, and your presence here today confirms just how right he was. Anyway, one of the first of these grand hotels was the Glen House, which was located at the base area from which you began your climb. This hotel and 3 others burned to the ground over the years, around the turn of the century and after, though the base area is still referred to as the Glen, as it always has been. Seasons may change, but they always return, and the day will again surely come when travelers will find lodging in this most historic and remarkable of places. As you drive on through the hardwood forest, try to imagine what the early road builders faced. Dense trees and underbrush, sloping ridges, and immense boulders and ledges were at every turn. Not a particularly inviting place to excavate a road, but this is Mount Washington, and no adversity would be too great if it resulted in the conquest of this famed peak. One young woman who visited the Glen House in 1854 wrote an article for Harper's Weekly magazine. In it, she recounted her memories of the road as a work in progress.
We have all been walking in the lowering twilight on the road which is making its way up Mount Washington. Though nothing is impossible to modern science, it would seem impossible to vanquish the obstacles to the enterprise, the inevitable steepness of the ascent, the rocky precipices. We passed on through the debris of blasted rocks, stumps of uprooted trees, and heaps of stones, till we got far enough into the mountain to feel its stern solitude. Mary Langdon.
And when that was written in 1854, they were still 7 years from completion. Unfortunately, for General Maycomber, his financial backing ran out halfway up the mountain, so it ended up taking 2 companies. Years of backbreaking labor, blasting, logging, clearing, and grading to complete the task. During a 2-year delay after the first company had failed, it was questionable as to whether or not the project would ever be completed. But the lure of Mount Washington was too great to keep this road from reaching the top.
The whole thing is an unmitigated nuisance.
Particularly difficult to make any progress with natural obstacles such as the weather combined with the primitive technology of the era to slow things down. Since dynamite had not been invented yet, all the blasting was done with black powder, a dangerous and at times unstable explosive. In order to split the massive rock ledges which blocked the planned way, individual holes were hand-drilled into solid rock and then filled with black powder, blown up and split apart one at a time. All the logging was done with axes, saws, and elbow grease. Teams of oxen and workhorses drew carts filled with gravel. All in all, it was a dirty, dangerous job, largely accomplished by immigrant labor working in a place not yet fit for man nor beast. But finally, on August 8th, 1861, it was done and done right. Many decades later, in a study completed with aerial surveys and the latest technology, the Army Corps of Engineers could find no improvement to the route as laid out in the middle of the last century. Today, this toll road is still privately owned and operated by the Mount Washington Summit Road Company, and, with very little change of ownership, has remained a family business. As you continue upward, glimpses of mountain vistas begin to reveal themselves, but it wasn't always this way. In fact, around the turn of the century, logging barons had virtually clear-cut much of what is now the White Mountain National Forest. The decimation of these native forests created not only fire and erosion dangers, but created such an unsightly mess that the cause of conservation was taken up by the average citizen and politicians alike. As a result, the Weeks Act of 1911 established the White Mountain National Forest, among many others. These mountains remain protected today as a pristine reminder of the natural beauty of the wilderness. It is ironic, though, that it took the near destruction of everything that you see around you to motivate the effort to save it. Thankfully, what you see today is remarkably similar to what the first adventure seekers found in 1861. It was called the carriage road in those days, and there were as many as 25 mountain wagons and 120 horses in service each day of the season. These mountain wagons were specially designed and constructed for the carriage road by the Abbott Downing Company in Concord, New Hampshire. This company manufactured the famous Concord stagecoaches, which, aside from being shipped worldwide for use in commerce and transportation, were used in practically every Western movie ever made. The carriage road mountain wagons were pulled by 6 horses and seated as many as 12 passengers. A typical trip took 4 hours to get up, and though no one was in a rush in those days, passengers were at times asked to assist with one task. On windy days, those making the journey were asked to get out and collect rocks to add weight to the wagon so that it wouldn't tip over in the strong winds above treeline. Now, the ride down was another adventure in itself, taking a good 2 hours. The wheels on every trip down wore through a set of leather brakes as the horse, driver, and wagon fought gravity the whole way. Also, the carriage road stages weren't alone on the road by any means. Individual hotels had their own coaches for their guests, while other folks drove the family buckboard or surrey or rode on horseback. Then, as now, it was an active road that required the driver's full attention. As the word continued to spread, more and more people found their way to New Hampshire's North Country. New railroads continued to push their way past the lakes and into the hills, and while still a rural setting, the world had finally beaten its path to Mount Washington's door. Now, long before traveling tourists found Mount Washington, way back in the early 1600s, it was thought to be a place laden with riches. The quartz and the mica, which you will see glinting amidst the gray rock above treeline, was mistakenly considered to be diamonds and precious metals. Now, no doubt the disappointed early settler came to that realization after his long climb revealed only long views and no treasure. To continue upward, you will begin to notice startling changes to the vegetation. Nearer to the bottom is a typical northeastern hardwood forest composed of maple, oak, birch, and beech trees. Further on, you'll see fewer hardwoods and more evergreens like balsam fir and spruce. And more significantly, these trees are diminishing greatly in size as the combination of wind, cold, and scarcity of proper soil create a difficult growing environment. Continuing upward, you are entering Krumholtz, or Crooked Wood Zone. In some cases, these stunted and beautifully twisted and gnarled trees with a height of no more than just 2 or 3 feet are more than 100 years old. These unique trees have adapted to survive in this often inhospitable location, as has a wide variety of wildlife that calls this mountain range home. Moose, black bear, and deer are among the larger species, while bobcat, beaver, porcupine, raccoons, foxes, and countless types of birds can be found on Mount Washington slopes. Even on the summit, mice, moles, shrews, and voles have all adapted to survive in this extreme environment. As your journey takes you further up the mountainside, notice it has begun to get a bit cooler and that the trees continue to get smaller. As the road goes on to its height of more than a mile in the sky, 6,288 feet to be exact, the climate changes with it, eventually reaching the equivalent temperature one may find 600 miles north of here in the Arctic tundra region. This is further exemplified by the truly stunning array of alpine flowers, lichens, and mosses, some of which can be seen preserved at the Observatory Museum at the summit. Just think of it, in the distance of just a few miles upward, you've now traveled from the more familiar hardwood forest of our region through the Krumholtz to an area more like that of Alaska and Greenland. In total, there are dozens of rare species of plants found in the alpine zone of the Presidential Range. Plants like the dwarf cinquefoil live only in the White Mountains and nowhere else in the planet and are listed as federally protected species. Many of these unusual plants, though small, are very old, and some varieties don't even flower until they are 20 or more years old. Overall, many experts believe this mountain's landscape that you're viewing to be more than 10,000 years in the making. So again, we ask, when leaving your vehicle to explore the mountainside, you're aware that the endless vistas are only one of the most obvious wonders. There is an amazing world just under your feet, which, if not cared for, could be lost forever. Never pick up or step on a flower. When you're out of your vehicle above treeline, please step only on the rocks. In this way, our fragile ecosystem will be something to marvel at for centuries to come. Scientific interest in Mount Washington has been ongoing for more than 200 years. In the last century, just the novelty of being here was enough to inspire whole books. One famous writer in the mid-1800s, T. Starr King, had this to say about the mountain's various climates. The Tip-Top House he refers to was built in 1853. You're going to see it in just a bit. It is the only original Summit building that survived the Great Fire of 1908. The Summit, as you'll see it today, has evolved greatly from how it all began so long ago. It's always been a hub of activity for travelers to the White Mountains. The Summit community in the 1890s was a very busy place. It featured a large hotel, stage office, railroad station, and even had its own newspaper. Among the Clouds was the first and only newspaper ever to be published on a mountaintop. All visitors to the peak had their names published in its pages, along with the local news and gossip. In fact, the latest daily editions used to make their way down after hours on the Cog railway track on a contraption known as a slide board, or more popularly known as Devil's Shingle. Real history was made again in 1899 when a little-known inventor named Freeland O. Stanley drove his locomobile up the road. He did it for publicity, hoping to build a name for his fledgling company. Stanley began his expedition from Newton, Massachusetts, with a goal of finishing on the top of Mount Washington. Now, the automotive age was dawning, and on August 31st, 1899, an unlikely little vehicle looking like a horse-drawn buggy without the horse became the first motor car to climb the mountain. As noted in Flora Stanley's account of the adventure, their journey received more laughter than laurels, as motor vehicles were still a virtually unknown sight to the general public. The amazed responses of the folks in each village they passed through, combined with the success of the Mount Washington ascent, proved the value of this well-conceived publicity stunt. But few realized that Stanley's vehicle was the first of many that would follow, and that a new age had begun. Even F.E. Stanley himself, F.O. Stanley's twin brother and partner, wasn't sure of what the new invention would be capable of. As expressed in an 1897 letter to his wife after one of their horseless carriages nearly caused an accident in town, well...
January 27, 1875. Coldest of the season, 46 below. The wind is blowing a hurricane and has done so all through the night past. Had work today to keep warm. The wind and cold penetrate every cranny. Enormous drifts of snow have formed about the building, and as
History had shown us it did do more than stand still, as did the Stanley brothers, who went on to create the still famous Stanley Steamer. You will soon be approaching the summit. If it is a clear day, you are seeing some of the most magnificent views to be found anywhere in the United States. If it is not a clear day, then you are truly learning what it means to be among the clouds. Now, you've already passed the Horn, Oh My God Curve, the Cragway, Cow Pasture, Mother-in-Law's Drop, and Home Stretch. In any case, the summit community welcomes you. Take the time to visit the historic Tip Top House, which holds the record as the oldest summit building, standing since 1853. The Sherman Adams State Park building will offer you a top-of-the-world perspective from the observation deck. Hot meals and restrooms are inside. While there, wander through the Mount Washington Observatory Museum and gift shop downstairs for a look at some rare mementos of the past. And if you only see one thing, be sure to stop at the historic Summit Stage Office, which is where the observers huddled while measuring the world's highest recorded wind, 231 miles per hour in 1934. You won't have any trouble recognizing which building it is. It's the one that's chained to the ground. If your headlights are on, be sure to turn them off before exploring the summit. You should be coming to the summit pretty soon, so save the rest of this tour for when you begin the trip back down. Enjoy yourself at the top of New England.